Our topic for our symposium this evening is the beef on dairy phenomena. When we get together as a group to talk about new technologies and new happenings in the world of AI, this is really a very timely topic for our industry, and one that I know that many of you have heard the term beef on dairy throughout the last few years, but maybe haven't delved into exactly what's going on and what's really caused it. So hopefully by the end of our symposium this evening, you'll have a better idea of what's going on really in another part of the beef industry, and that is on the dairy side. And so tonight, we've got two really excellent speakers that I'm excited for you to hear as we go through our program this evening. When we look at beef on dairy from a historical perspective, it's really not a new phenomenon. For many years, low-cost beef semen has been used in dairies primarily to breed low genetic or problem cows that were tough to settle. As many of us know, for many years, we sold semen that was mostly from older bulls that still had excess inventory, whose marketability probably wasn't that popular in the beef market anymore. The primary selection was basically for just calving ease, and mostly the bulls were used were Angus and polled Herefords. Doug Frank was reminding me today, when you look at a lot of the historic pictures back from many of the AI cooperatives and companies back from the early years in those industries, you'll see Angus and polled Hereford bulls in their lineup. And really the first beef bulls in many of the AI organizations were for beef on dairy. But that changed here in the last few years, and our speakers will talk to that. A couple of the really driving factors was really uptake in technology. And one thing that many of us here at the BIF convention have talked about for years is new technologies and how it drives changes in the industry. We've talked about at our last symposium the use of sex semen, and that's really been great uptake here in the dairy industry. We also saw market signals coming back to producers on the value of Holstein steers, and I'm sure that our speakers will address that as well. And the graphs that I'm about to show you on unit sales in the AI industry, you'll see that the year 2017 is really the inflection point when this phenomenon really took off. Information from our National Association of Animal Breeders on total beef and dairy unit sales, and this is both domestic and international combined. It's shown a steady increase, especially in the last 20 years, on both beef and dairy sales. But as you can see, in 2017, there was a dramatic increase in beef unit sales. When we break that out a little bit, if you look at the red line, that's domestic beef sales over really the last 50 years. And for the most part, it's been a pretty flat line. But we did see back in around 2010, we saw a steady increase. And I think, again, when I think about what happened back about 10 or 15 years ago, we saw better technologies for timed AI, and we saw an increase in usage of AI because we basically breed cattle on appointment. So we saw an increase in beef AI usage. We also saw a steady increase in the international market, and it's become a tremendous part of our business from about 2005 on. You can see the dramatic rise in that yellow line. The purple line is custom beef, and I will point out at this point that unlike the export and the domestic, which are based on units sold, the custom beef is based on units collected. So it's a little bit apples and oranges, but you can still give a pretty good idea that we're seeing a lot of producers utilizing custom collection for their own herd bulls, and that's been on a steady increase as well. We look at total beef unit sales by category in 1990 to 2020. Again, you can see a steady increase in both the domestic beef unit sales and also the international beef unit sales. Custom collection units continue to climb, but not at quite a steady level. But again, you can see where our industry has gone from basically about a 5 million unit industry to now reaching almost 20 million units. Well, here's the interesting part of those numbers. When you look at the beef units by market, and this is in fiscal year 2020, on beef, as we broke out in 2020, we saw about 2.2 million units going into beef herds. We saw about 3.1 million units be custom collected and 6.5 million units going internationally. But let's look at beef on dairy. We saw almost 5 million units of beef semen going into dairies domestically, more than 2 times the amount going into beef herds. We saw about almost 200,000 units being custom collected that's going into dairies, and we saw about 600,000 units being exported in the dairies. But if you don't think beef on dairy is a big deal, and you look at 5 million units going out into dairies, it's huge in this industry. And for those of you that have watched sale reports or had the opportunity to market bulls here in the last few years, you've seen the impact that beef on dairy has brought to your farms and ranches. So when we look at the total beef on beef versus beef on dairy units, considering both domestic and internationally, it's about a 60-40 split, with 60% of the semen going on beef and about 40% going into dairies. But keep in mind that a big chunk of that is our international market, where nearly all those units are going into beef cattle. When we look at just our domestic unit sales, those numbers kind of flip. It's almost 60% going into dairies and just 43% going into beef. So it's become a huge part of the AI industry here in the United States. When people say, well, what are the dairymen looking for? And I'll let our speakers address this, but this is just pretty in simplistic terms. They want homozygous polled, homozygous black cattle. They want fertility in their herds, and they want calving ease. So when we look at the trends for AI semen sold in the United States since 2013, again, when you focus on 2017, when this market really changed, you can see the black breeds. And in this situation, the Simmental and Limousin bulls that are being marketed are just about all homozygous black and homozygous polled. You can see the dramatic change it's affected our industry. You know, in just 7 years ago, there was about 1.3 million units of Angus semen sold. And this last year, there was over 3.5. When we look at Simmentals, it went from about 200,000 in 2013 to about 1.2 million units. And when we look at the Limousin breed, it went from about 60,000 units to right around 800,000 units. So a dramatic increase in the amount of semen being sold on breeds that are primarily black. But it's not just the black breeds that are being affected. When you look at some of the other breeds, like major beef breeds here in the United States, Red Angus and Hereford have been pretty much a straight line. Charolais, which of course is a white breed, had a dramatic increase also in 2017. And that was primarily driven by the markets out in the Pacific Northwest and the need for those people to produce a calf out of a Holstein that's sired by a Charolais bull. So it has a dramatic impact on a breed, regardless of color, if it's being used in the right form. As I said earlier, I'm really pleased with our 2 speakers we have here this evening. Lynn Boadwine from Boadwine Farms in Baltic, South Dakota, and Randall Grimmius from Grimmius Cattle Company in Hanford, California. Our first speaker will be Lynn Boadwine. He grew up on a diversified family farm near Baltic, South Dakota, where he's a 4th generation to reside on their farm, founded in 1874. Lynn started farming with his parents after graduation from South Dakota State University in 1986. Together, he and his parents and his wife, Trish, they have grown their home operation from 42 cows to 3,700 cows. Lynn also is a managing partner in 2 other dairy operations that manage over 7,000 cows, bringing the total to nearly 12,000. During his career, Lynn has had the opportunity to serve 17 years on the Land O'Lakes Cooperative Board of Directors, and he continues to serve on the South Dakota Animal Industry Board. Lynn has had the privilege to be involved in many different organizations and has received special recognition for his service to the industry. In 2020, Boadwine Farms received the National Beef Quality Assurance Dairy Herd Award. Lynn is especially proud of his employees' tireless efforts in animal care, community relations, and sustainability of their farm. Please join me in a welcome for Lynn Boadwine.
Okay, thanks, Don. It's good to be here. A lot of times I'm in and around dairy groups, so I'm in a beef group. I'm a little bit nervous. It's a different crowd. And then I got even more scared because I saw some folks I know from South Dakota. When I was driving here, I thought I'm not gonna know anybody, so I can say whatever I want and get away with it. Well, it's on me now. So I'm gonna probably take the little lighter side, the dairyman's perspective. I'm gonna talk mostly about the evolution of our operation and what we did. And I think it's pretty in line with what happened in the dairy industry and how we moved in using beef at a small level to where we are today. So in the first slide, what you can see here is I took a picture of our old dairy farm, 1986. That's when I got out of college, milked 42 cows. Is there anybody in here? Know your beef guys. Did anybody milk cows? Is anybody? There's always a beef guy that's milked cows. Did you like it? No hands. So in 1986, you can see in those pictures, the old barn, the 706, my Yamaha 125, bending up and down in a hot old stanchion barn. Didn't know any better. Fast forward 2021, our operation, 11,000 cows across 4 different milking operations. You can see that's been a journey. It's just been constant growth. Every year is expansion, a construction plan. But that's the way the dairy industry's been. The dairy industry, like a lot of agriculture, has experienced rapid consolidation and growth. And that's really a part of what we've progressed to this dairy on beef. So kind of the backdrop, 1986 to 2010, I just grabbed those years as where I thought they were kind of we were growing, but it was a tough go. I wrote down there credibility crisis for Holsteins. So what does that mean? So my dad always milked Holsteins. Didn't know any different. When we started, we did an AI. We had an old bull out back. We were kind of a nothing herd. Cows. That's when I had to get in gear. I learned how to AI. Went to one dairy class in college, right towards the end when I figured I was doomed to be a dairy farmer. Got back to the farm and, we had like a 40-pound tank average, just dismal. Lots of different things that we needed to do. So improving genetics was kind of the slow one, but then nutrition, we improved nutrition, but it was a slow burn. In that industry, culling rates. We often, as we grew to this larger size dairy, we didn't know how to operate it. I went from 42 cows, ramped up, got to 300, got to 900, got to 1,400. We didn't quite have everything to manage this dairy. The reproductive wasn't very good. We were using conventional semen. There wasn't sex semen. So we were producing just enough heifers to survive. And we'd probably cull 35 to 40% of our herd at the worst. And there's a lot of times others in the dairy industry similar when they're ramping up in large herds, trying to understand management, have just atrociously high cull rates. So poor fertility. Then you think of the dairy industry. The dairy industry, I believe it's about 70%. Like looking at Don's graphs, we've adopted AI at a larger rate than the beef industry. Of course, that's logical. And Holstein bulls kill you. That was my dad. We're gonna AI, and but we're probably at 70% of the dairy cows are AI'd in the United States. So the problem I saw when I said credibility crisis for Holsteins, we didn't have genomics, we didn't have IVF, we didn't have this rapid pace of acceleration. And in the industry, yeah, we had some good bulls, but we were choosing some bulls that weren't so good. And the problem is, when did you find that out? By the time you prove out an animal, know what she is and whatever, the industry's jumped on her because of cow family, and you got half the industry breeding to her, and you find out, well, health traits are bad, reproductive's poor. Little by little, that changed, and some of the things that probably disguised that is we had this in the early 90s, we had this thing called BST, bovine somatotroph. Never heard of that? Okay. You don't get cows bred on time, but what you can do, you can give her a shot. You can extend her lactation. You might be able to milk her indefinitely because you're giving her this shot. Well, some years back, that went away. We don't have those tools. So what have we learned to do? I'm just using 2010 post that, let's take it several years of advancing technologies really opened the door for this industry shift. Like Don talked about, the sex semen sales. So I was early on at my herd jumping into sex semen because I was always growing. And I had gone all over the United States because the only place I found heifers is retiring dairymen. And I was grabbing heifers here, heifers there, buying cow herds out to expand. And when the first sex semen came along, I was like, wow, this is going to be great. But you know what the studs did? You didn't have very good bulls to choose from then. Right when the first sex semen came out, because you threw, as I understand it, you threw away so much semen in the sort, and they didn't know where the direction. And number one, I think maybe these guys didn't want to sell their best, wanted to keep it in because they wanted to keep their high volume. So we had kind of the poorer end bulls, but guys like me jumped after it, and we started using sex semen early. Now, we'd had kind of this hodgepodge herd from all over the country. Buy them here, buy them there. And so it was kind of exciting to me, with this genomic thing starting, that I could change my herd pretty fast. We dabbled in a little bit of IVF, found out, wow, that was really expensive. Anybody do IVF? Costs a lot of money. And I think, what we went to really is breed our heifers to sex semen, genomic test, pick the best, breed the best. And that was one of our strategies going forward. So we were kind of early in this, this dairy on beef thing. Well, I'm going to go back. I was really early because back in 1986, my dad, he hooked me. I went back my story, I missed it. My dad hooked me into the dairy industry because I didn't really want to milk cows, and he used to use beef. Boy, he was an innovator. He used beef on his Holstein heifers out in the pasture. Bought Angus bulls from the neighbor that the neighbor said they were calving eats. And he gave me the females. So I started a 25 cow stock cow herd that was half, and I raised that herd. And I say, in the dairy industry, we always talk about a cow with nice udder. Well, these cows had bags. They didn't have udders. They were not a very pretty cow. Well, I cashed in that herd. I made a down payment. So we were early in dairy beef. I exited for a while. Now we're back. So sex semen was a big mover. Reduce calving difficulties. When we started putting sex semen on our heifers, we reduced our birth weights by 10 pounds. We realized that was a critical. We were losing like 15% of our first calf heifers. They wouldn't breed back next lactation. That was huge. Then kind of as that, our net merit just climbed. Now we're doing this to our whole herd. All of our young breeding, we're sorting out the bottom end. So our net merits just moved at a dramatic pace. Something that I was shocked, so I said to myself, well, I don't need IPF, whatever, I can build a good herd. And then preg rates, there's a lot of things in and around the industry. In the dairy industry, FARM, the whole social thing of how we
now we know.
You know what? We put cows in say in free stalls. We made sure they had proper line. You know what that did? It helped settle cows. Good foot health. It helps settle cows. All these things to improve reproduction. Unlike the beef, it's tough getting a Holstein cow milking 120, 130 pounds. It's tough to get her pregnant. So as this industry evolved, just a whole bunch of improvements in how we manage cattle. And one thing I want to talk about is industry consolidation. Both the producer and the vendor. Vendors like the vendors like the animal health groups. So guys like to get larger, and their focus, I used to deal with just local guys.
Do you want to leave that meeting? Because if I remove you, it won't let you back in, just in case something else.
Companies that I deal with are guys with their masters. It's a higher level. In my the value I receive from them is higher than what I did 30 years ago. Now all of a sudden you got to consolidate. Dairies are consolidating. The consolidation of agriculture. These vendors, when you start having changes, well, they don't just tell Lynn Boadwine, that big neighbor that's milking 15,000 cows that's my competitor. They go to him and they share this good news with him as well. But it moves that industry faster. So here's the fastest. Don talked about this. Packing plants, a couple packing plants decided we don't want to hang those big old ulcers anymore. And all of a sudden, that market crashed. Our dairy, we'd already started. We had a lot of black calf when this hit. So I was selling, but this is the light switch moment. So line it up. Got this technology, spec semen, dairymen theory of genomic testing. Their first CD, this is real. I'm going to genomic test. I'm going to breed my heifers. There's enough articles. And then there's all these industry guys, vendors, passing that playbook everywhere, giving deals. And then the semen industry at that point has started spexing their best bulls. So you can buy quality genetics. So you get quality genetics. Our reproduction is better. Our reproduction is going. So in that period of time, our farm, we went from like 40% call rates to right now we see 4%. Our pregnancy rates were at 15%. Pregnancy rate term that how many of your reproductive pool that you get pregnant in one cycle. So we took our preg rates from 15% to now 35%. When you put all of those things together, now everybody in the industry says, whoa, I need to switch. And if I can get another $100 bill selling a beef calf, I got to do it. And if you understand the dairy industry, I tell people one year, we break even. One year
we might
good
make good money,
and
and one year we lose money.
and I
I
think
think more recently, it's just 2 years we lose money.
Like,
Cycle. You know, always talk about extending cycles. Extend it.
But,
You know,
so
so
that
that $100, that $150,
turned
turn
the
the
light,
light bulb on for your producers.
and that
That
really,
really flipped the switch.
and
And
the
the
industry
industry actually
screwed
screwed
up.
up.
And that was
That
one of
was
the
one of the
last,
last.
what we put out of our office. We're selling these crosses, 260. You can see a whole team full. So for that $6-7 of semen and shoot, our breeding program now is we genomic test every female, the first lactation animal, the highest of them, and you're sticking a beef hole in her. I had to get over it. But 80% of all those cows on the dairy are getting bred beef.
It's just going to go out on Zoom.
So a little bit, I think we're on dairy count for conception rate on heifers. First, virgin heifer, 58% for sex semen. So sex semen, when my first sex semen started using it was like 32. And our conception rate on beef is 68. So our
conception rate for cows is 49% sex.
and 47% beef. So you see,
I'm not reading that. You see how
those two correlate. So
I
I want
want everybody in the room that's going to make beef sires.
one
One
thing
thing we got to take home.
I
I
need
need
a
a
black
black calf. That's what everybody keeps telling me. I keep talking about, hey,
what about the meat
traits?
traits? But
But
everybody wants
to
to feel like
penalize me.
there's
There's
a little white.
And
I guess
spray
spray
painting
black.
doesn't work.
So anyway, I
I
think
think
there's a
there's
lot
of things that need to probably change.
You
You
gotta
gotta
understand,
understand,
the
the
dairy
dairy producer, most of them are selling their calves
at
at
birth,
birth.
and
And
so
so until we can,
pull that
extra value,
what
we
we
gotta
got
worry about
making
making
sure
sure that
we
we
don't
don't
hit
hit the bull, and it's a big deal. This is something that I recognize
the
the
beef
beef industry doesn't have a lot of
look at
conception rates for our beef.
look for that
That
data
data is not
readily
readily out there until you kind of
creating
create it yourself by trying to pull.
school of bulls. We
We
need
need your conception.
because our
Our
milk
milk cows are really a life.
and a lot of dairymen
It's just a
byproduct, nice
extra.
So with that, predictions for the future, I'm not very good at predicting the future, just a few things that I want to know. Vertical linkages, more and more. I used to think nobody could ever run 1,000 cow dairy. That's what I thought when I had 42 cows. There's no way. Well, guess what? That's changed. And I don't, large dairies get bigger, so maybe they will integrate. More beef, more sex. I think that switch. I think anybody that's going to be in the dairy industry is going to breed beef really in a proportion that we. I don't think it's going away. This is not a fact. So I look at the things. Currently, I've dabbled in retaining ownership. Not much, just some fed through reverse. We've done pretty good. We've made some money. We don't have the facilities to do it. But think of it, if I do more of that, okay, am I going to start using sex semen? And then am I really concerned? Are they going to come out with bulls that really mate with even the Holstein family so that I have? I mean, is that a possibility? So, I mean, we're all trying to find it. So, anyway, I'll end with that. Turn it back over. Thank you.
Second speaker for our symposium is Randall Grimmius. Randall was raised in a loving home with a family with strong faith in God. He has a twin sister, an older sister, and a younger brother. The older sister and his younger brother currently work with him, Grimmius Cattle Company. He opened the door for the ranch that they now have. When his dad passed away in 2012, God placed Phil Belko in his path when he married his niece. He has been strategic in not only filling a big empty spot, but also in helping with the growth of the business. In 2019, Phil became a partner in the business. They now operate 3 ranches with a total capacity of about 200,000 head and farm about 2,000 acres and employ over 650 people. Randall has been married to Beth for 26 years. They have 4 daughters, ages 17 to 24 years of age. They've had the opportunity to have the guardianship of over 12 additional kids over the last 10 years. Currently, they have 5 young people living in their home. They have a passion to raise up children to have a chance in life and to be able to know and love the Lord. His philosophy is that everything he owns belongs to the Lord, so it takes pressure off of him and compels him to use what he has been given to God's glory. Please join me in a round of applause and welcome Randall Grimmius.
Well, thanks for having me here. It's good to be here. Iowa is a pretty cool place. It's what I've noticed like the last couple of days. It's like there's not a lot of people. There's a lot of people here, but I haven't seen a lot of people around a city. So we're used to seeing a lot more people and rain. We just haven't had much water in California. So hopefully we don't bring any of the lack of rain to you guys. But it's sure cool to see rain and have rain on our heads. So I'm going to start off today a little bit. I got 3 things to kind of cover. Basically, my family. Beth and I kind of do some cool things with our kids, so I'll kind of show you that, talk about that, and then our ranches, and then I'll talk about how this beef on dairy has really changed things. Beth and I have been married for 26 years. We kind of talked about that. We have 4 daughters. We've had 12 to 15 young adults come into our family, most through guardianship and other connections. Kind of why we do this. Basically, it's like my wife, she had kind of a tougher upbringing, so God kind of rescued her from a lot of pain and darkness and called her to do the same in others. And we kind of look at the grace that God gives us, we're going to give to others. And I had a passion for that kind of thing too. So it's been kind of unique how God has brought a lot of people, and it kind of ran in tide with in sync with how our ranch grew. We kind of had more kids keep coming into, and it hasn't been easy. It's not like it's all like perfect. Everything's great, but God's really moved through it all and stretched us in both ways. I believe everyone has different gifts. Being a father, a mother, making food, hanging out, one-on-one mentor, building things, fixing things, tearing things down. There was when we brought a lot of people into our life, the community supported us in a lot of ways too. So it's not like we were doing it on our own. And I think being authentic works everywhere, whether you're in the street or on Main Street or just in regular life. It helps cross through, because sometimes you can fear the street or fear those kinds of things, but when you're authentic with people, it moves people. I'll jump to my dad. I lost him 10 years ago to blood cancer. He always said, do not feel pride over accomplishments, but instead feel humbled over what God entrusted us with. He was not into a lot of employees. They would overwhelm him. So I used the principles of how he treated me and brought it to a lot of people. He was always willing to go out and try new things. He was a very steady hand in my life. He did not hold on to things too tightly, which taught me a lot. This brings me to Phil. Phil came on about the same time my dad was getting sick. He married my niece, Brianna. He really helped continue to grow the business. He learned and took hold of the business. I think it's important to bring younger generations into the business. Kind of helps with building clients. I know my biggest growth, because we obviously grew with the calf ranch when we started 20 years ago, from bringing in a few calves to a lot. And my biggest customer that I could hit was the college kid coming back from college, coming back to the dairy, because I would come to him and say, hey, this is something new. This is what this is how I can give you something new. And so that younger generation is pretty important to bring in, to layer it in, as long as they take hold and they do it, they can step up to it. If they don't step up to it, then it can hurt you. But Phil was pretty good at that. Some of our calf ranch facts. Today we're bringing in about 1,200 newborns a day. Sometimes it goes up to 1,500. Sometimes it's 700, 800, depending on the time of year. But we average about 1,200 babies a day, which is about 450,000 per year. Our makeup is about 40% of them are custom heifers that we raise for the dairymen, and then 60% of them are either the Angus cross or the Holstein bull itself. The custom heifer is the big part of my business. That's what I tell our guys. We got to keep our dairymen happy. If our dairymen are happy, because their self-interest is, which makes sense, is that heifer calf to get back. And if we could be the best in the world at doing that, then they're going to sell me their bull calf. If I do a bad job with their heifers, then I leave myself open to somebody else taking their bull calf. So that's a big part of it. Just kind of a random fact. We feed bottles of milk. We feed about 145,000 bottles a day. Our calves turn over every 120 to 150 days. So if our inventory is around 200,000 at our peak, and in the next 4 months, if you come back 4 months later, we got another 200,000. So it's just a real turnover business. I also feed cattle, like native cattle, buying cattle off the hills and grass cattle, kind of 4 to 6 weight steers and heifers. And we feed about 50,000 of those a year. And I finish those mostly in Kansas and Texas. So I'm kind of before I raised babies, I was a cattle feeder, buying cattle through auctions and stuff. And I still go to auctions and buy cattle. I like that kind of stuff. At the calf ranch, our pillars that we kind of stand by, especially when I got the business going, was God, who kind of made everything happen in different ways, opened a lot of doors. That's like a whole nother speech. But products. So I try to produce a really good calf for the dairyman. I looked at it, if that heifer, because we charge by the day to the dairyman. If my heifer comes back weighing 3 1/4, but it costs me more to make it that, but my competition is 300, or the dairyman is a little bit the bigger calf, then I stay full. Even if I don't have as much margin, I can stay full, and it seems to really work in that regard. And then information. There's a lot of guys at the calf ranch still before, they never really give you information. So I'll show my dairymen like how they compare and compete with other dairymen to show where they rank. And so I really give a lot of information to the dairies. Let's see. I'm going to play a little video here. It's 2 minutes. It's Phil's talking about our calf ranch. It kind of shows you
3 pillars that Randall has instilled in me and in the company and kind of our culture. God, product, and paperwork. We do everything knowing that what we've got isn't really ours. It's God's, and He can take it away or He can grow it how He wants to do it. And so everything we do, from the way we treat our customers, the way we treat employees, each other, the way we handle calves, it's knowing that we're working for God's glory and we're stewarding His resources. The product pillar, we try to create the best calf possible for our customers. We do that by not sacrificing the feed that we give them, the facilities that we put our resources into, and we're constantly trying to monitor and analyze data and calf performance to send back a heifer calf that a dairyman likes and appreciates. Paperwork pillar would be the data that we collect. We take a blood sample of every calf that comes on the ranch, bulls and heifers. The second day that they're on the ranch, we'll draw blood and we test for their serum protein. It gives us an idea if that calf was fed an adequate amount of colostrum at the dairy. And so it helps us identify calves that might be a problem. And then we create reports that we send back to dairymen, letting them know if their calves are getting fed the right amount on time and those sorts of things. And it's a good tool for them to use to help with their employees if they need to change protocols or anything to make sure that their calves are getting fed the right amount of colostrum on time. That's one of the things that we feel like separates us from some of our competition. We put together a lot of reports that dairymen can use to know how their calves are performing at the ranch.
Now I'll kind of talk to you guys about the beef genetics and dairy and how it affects the calf ranch. And so why did we do this? It started with I feed a lot of cattle with pokey feeders in Kansas approximately 20 years ago through U.S. premium beef tracking, EIDs through the plant. Through that, we're able to determine which cattle graded well. So it's kind of interesting. You guys have those 3 Angus steers on the top of that page from Pokey, and it's on your website. And then I saw that. I was like, Pokey, I bet that's Angus. I bet they're mine. And then I saw that white tag with that 2K, so that indicated that they were ours. And so it was kind of interesting. So all those animals have an EID. So if I bought a steer from a local ranch, if I bought 100 head off the video or whatever, then I track that animal all the way through, get that information back. So I started gathering this big database. My brothers, we're not great mechanics and things like that, but we're pretty good with computers, or my brother really is. So we have a lot of this information that we can gather up. And so it's worked out pretty well. And Pokey was a big part of that back in the day. And then along the way, we fed some Holstein crosses in that process. And we realized they graded well. And we kind of realized we had an option. We had something going on there. And so I've had different bonus programs with dairies probably the last 15 to 20 years in different ways, but it really got pushed, kind of like what the other speaker's talking about a couple years back. So there's 3 big factors that brought it to the dairy industry. First, the Midwest, the packers were discounting Holsteins from kind of 10 back to we don't want them. And we sent about 20 to 50% of our Holstein bull population was going to Texas and Kansas and such. So we kind of had a situation where we had to do something because the Holstein bull could kind of become like a Jersey calf where you can't really raise it because it's not cost effective. So, and then third, another thing was the performance, the difference in death loss, the cull rate, the cheaper cost to gain, the graded better, the yielded better, the calf was a better animal. So the action steps to make it happen, we started with a buyback program that guaranteed the basis. So an example is that I had a $50 bull calf, I would give a $225 bonus. That's when we really pushed it. I think I started off with like at the very beginning, I was like 25, then I went to 50, then I went to 75. So it sounds like an auction, but kind of all over the place. But when we really got ferments, we went to 2.25. And today it's probably 150 to $200 over. My part of what I told my dairyman is Holstein genetics is going this way, beef genetics is going this way. They keep getting better at what they do, but they're farther apart. So the packers obviously not going to look at that carcass the same. 40 years ago, they're probably closer together, but today they're too far apart. During COVID last year, that kind of really also legitimized our program pretty hard because part of our guarantee is that we go 9 months. So if I tell you I'm going to pay you 2.25 over, I guarantee that till my next time I tell you it's not. So I guarantee 9 months. So we were thankfully be able to stand behind our bonuses through that time. So it kind of really legitimized our program. And kind of made it pretty strong. And then part of my sales pitch to dairies too is like I've had some dairymen who are like, well, we don't use sex semen, we just AI. And then I've told them, you used to use bulls and now you're using AI. So at some point you change. So it's like he was saying, it's not going away. This thing isn't. The more progressive guys are going to stay with it and keep going. And those are the kind of dairymen that I actually try to pick up too. I want the more progressive guys. So starting a stud AI company, we didn't totally plan on, we didn't think we were going to get into starting a stud company, basically. It was about 3 years ago that we bought our first bull, and today we're kind of up to 200. But when we first started with the need of getting bulls or Angus semen to the dairies, we just we couldn't get the genetics exactly like we wanted. So that's kind of when we started doing it. But we started selling kind of 500 to 10,000 straws a month, or we went to 5 to 10,000 straws a month. Today we're kind of 80 to 100,000 straws a month. We didn't plan on selling semen back to the C-stock guys, but the volume of sales increased and we became more selective on our bulls. Our first bulls, we started with ribeye and phenotype, and then our bulls became more phenotype and EPDs as we purchased them. And so it's just kind of like everything kind of opened up. That the bull to your left, that set apart bull, that was one of our first bulls that kind of really got things going for us because he was a bull we bought, and then I bought him basically. He has phenotype and good numbers at Gardner. And then when they changed the numbers around, his numbers came up really high, so he got really popular. And then just with the volume of sales that we have, I can buy a bull like that, and I don't have the pressure of selling it to seed stock. I don't have, but I can sell it to my dairies, and I get that genetics back for me. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. And I even think I tell my seed stock guys that you can choose whatever bull you want for my ranch because I'm not prejudiced one way or the other. You know, I did pay a lot for Bonfire though, but and he's got like a 214 marbling, but he was pretty awesome. But even at that, I can get him into my dairies, and I'm going to get those calves back. I could get 5,000 to 10,000 babies from him off my dairies, and he's going to be pretty awesome. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So on that semen side, if you have any interest, you could always contact Noah, and then you could always kind of go to our website on some of those things. I think the future of the semen and the Angus and the dairy deal, it's definitely not going away. Jersey dairies are always a bit of a problem because the Jersey, I mostly work with Holstein dairies, but the Jersey cross is always difficult, whether it's Charolais, Angus, or Limousine, or Sem. You're always kind of battling that. We're doing some embryo work that I'm pretty excited about. That I think, with that, I think that I'm doing in some of my Jersey dairies that I think is going to solve some of those problems, and that I think can really be used even in commercial settings. But that's all. Thank you.
The question was, what beef breeds do you see being used the most for dairies? Lynn, we'll just start with you.
So, right now we're using a lot of Angus, but we've used Angus, Sim Angus, cross, So, I think the biggest thing for us is what do we do in the future? Do we retain ownership? Like I said, we've been placing some. I've just been seeing my first. I'm way behind. I'm a dairy farmer. Not, I'm just learning how to read kill sheets. And so it interests me. I'm impressed, but I think, I think there's opportunity. I think one point you get beyond just having a black calf, and I'm intrigued with the idea of placing them in good feed yards, maybe raising the calves and placing them in good feed yards. Like I'm from South Dakota, and placing them with neighbors that feed cattle.
I would say Angus semen is primarily what I buy is Angus bulls. I know there's some Sem Angus and things that are good too, but my program is primarily Angus. And yeah, I know kind of how they feed and what they do. It's a good breed, and I try to keep up with as we purchase bulls. I just try to keep up with the latest bulls. That's why I try to buy I tell guys too, my concept is like putting a Alabama or Clemson, whatever football team. I try to draft. I try to get the best bulls from around the country, and then I turn through bulls. So I move bulls in and move bulls out. And try to get the very best. You should be buying bulls for me. For me.
Wait a minute, now he's our customer.
Yeah. This vendor consolidation.
That's right.
See who, no, I think that's I'll go back to my old philosophy that I learned. I saw just incredible jumps. I never let off on what I was buying for bulls. I always bought top end bulls, and my herd changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. And I was not one of these guys that knew a lot of pedigrees. I just, I bought good bulls. So if I get deeper into the beef business, it's like, Randall, if you can improve your herd, if you can improve feedlot cattle, buy good bulls.
I've told my dairymen too, like if I was really into semen, we're cattle feeders, or that's kind of our main thing is if I really wanted to make money selling semen, I would have bought I could buy a $5,000 or $2,500 bull and turn a lot of semen, but our bulls are kind of in that $30,000, $40,000 range. And So I really want that echelon type thing because I'm going to own that calf all the way through, or have ownership, or I'm going to sell it, or whatever. I'm trying to build that product, and that was part of the initial reason why we got into it, because that tail end of like the beef semen that you were kind of talking about, that was kind of the tail end semen they were just kind of dumping off the dairies, was kind of given. I wanted to protect the dairyman in a way so that we could get that premium for that calf, because otherwise you just kind of had that marginalized calf, which wouldn't have been good.
So like I said earlier, right now, we're not retaining a lot of ownership. So marbling, and I just tell them, we need to be, we went with the Sim Holstein, some of their guidelines, and I can't even recite exactly. And I just told the guy that I buy semen from, I want to be in this criteria area, and I don't want to let off. But the challenge we have is the sorting, because every time we come back, we get some good bulls, and then we have some conception rate issues, and we're going to throw somebody out. That for me, the dairy farmer that's you've got to get that cow pregnant. If you, in the dairy industry, she becomes a DNB, a do not breed, a lot when she hits 180 days post calving. And a lot of beef people say, well, that ought to be easy to get her pregnant. But when she's given 160, 180 pounds of milk and working hard, that's a challenge. So our biggest job in the dairy business, I tell all my employees, we have to get that cow pregnant, and we have to get her pregnant right away. And so if we have a beef bull and we're selling the calves now, if we have a beef bull that is harming that chance of pregnancy, and I lose that cow that's already paid for because they couldn't get her pregnant, beef bull's out the door. That's the shift that needs to happen.
So from my perspective, so I have two perspectives, but from the dairyman's perspective, they don't care about almost anything except conception rate. So realizing that too, when I'm selling him semen, I got to take care of that. But then I have to, for me, I got to buy the genetics. So whatever bull he chooses it's going to be okay. Whether he chooses the Salvation bull or the bull that's, another bull, but I want them to all have good numbers. So, like I said, ribeye was important to me. Ribeye, marbling, dollar beef is what it usually ends up being for me. It seems like the things that I'm interested in is dollar beef, what it comes down to. But I have enough bulls where I have some bulls that are more marbling, more ribeye, and growth's important. But I really, phenotype is important to me just because I've been a cattle feeder, and I really, that's really important to me. But again, that's part of the reason we got into dairy or in the bull deal, because I knew my dairymen just want a conception rate, and I had to be able to give them a big enough selection to get that. I would define phenotype, like I try to physically see probably 70% of the bulls that I buy, and then I'll at least go to the stud and look at them. But I like, for me, I like, for one thing with a Holstein, I'm trying to bring it down and wider. So I like thicker, kind of heavier muscle, kind of like Salvation, if you show Salvation, but kind of a thicker, heavier muscle kind of a bull. Because I've had bulls that have great numbers, but they're kind of narrow, and their feet are haywire and everything else. So I want them to look like they're good performing kind of bulls. So I physically go look at them, I guess. I think it's fairly true. One thing that we do a lot of the carcass data, and one thing that I am struggling with the packing houses is not all, like US Premium will give me data, but not all the packing houses will give me data. So I can have data at my calf ranch, and I can have data through the feed yards, but I don't always get the data back from the packing houses like I would like. So we're kind of in the midst of building that. So I don't have quite all the data back, except just closeouts of how I've closed cattle out, and they're doing what they're supposed to, and they're getting better. So that's kind of like even my 200 bulls, my first 50 bulls that I bought, and the next 50 and the next 50, they just keep getting better. So but it takes a while when I sell it to him, and then he breeds his cow, and it just all that down the line to get to that calf. But what I've seen so far, it's improving. And how it correlates, I guess I just say it keeps improving. It's not going backwards. So I guess it's in line.
Randall, just to follow up on that question a little bit, when we hear about dairy steers, a lot of time they talk about ribeye shape and also liver abscesses.
Right.
So have you seen a big increase in correcting those issues with that crossbred calf?
I'd say the carcass itself, the packer really likes the cutability in the carcass itself. Liver abscesses is always a challenge, and that's something that some of these yards you have to continue to work on. But it's improved from the Holsteins, and I know that was a big complaint with the Holsteins in the first place. But it has improved. But the feed yards and everybody has to do their part to get it right on the liver abscess side.
Okay. The question was, when he sells semen on his bulls to the dairies, do they have a variation in price based on the genetic merit, or is the value captured basically when he buys the calf back? And Randall,
yeah, it's the same price to the dairyman, because like I said, the dairyman's main thing is conception rate. So it's up to me on that side to really make sure I get the right bulls to hit that. The seed stock world, it's a different deal, but that's, yeah.
Right.
So I'll just add, I've seen it, it's trying to develop. I mean, a lot of people, Randall, everybody's trying to figure out a model where I get the dairyman, I coax the dairyman to do the right thing and give me, but then the dairyman saying, he runs around and bids his semen.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times a semen company comes in the backside. Well, this is, we want your good bulls, your sex semen, and then, okay, $6-7 a straw, all the beef. We don't talk about which beef animal it is. We don't talk about what, like me, we put a criteria out there, and then they just keep rolling on how good they are in conception rate. So that's what I said at the end of my presentation. When you're not having the vertical piece, and some of the things that I see that'll be interesting in the future is, the ownership. We've got data on every one of these animals. That was the one thing that I thought, would be nice to develop. I can own these through the whole way through. I know everything about this animal. I know, any health treatments. I know where she's lived, every part of her life. I don't know if there's a value there. That's where I'm saying it's coming in the future, but where we're at right now, we've got a long ways to evolve.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we've had to kind of to police some of those kinds of things that the dairymen saying they buy in semen for me because mine costs $7 and they could buy it for $4 for somebody else. Then I do genomic test the calves every once in a while, and I know where the calves are coming in, and because that is a problem. Because the dairyman was like, "Why do I have to pay $7 when I could buy it for $4?" And I'm just like, "You're driving me crazy." Well, but they could do it because they didn't know the value of it, they didn't know the reason of it, and so that was part of. But that's part when we had the buyback, and then when the coronavirus really gave us legitimacy, because then the guys that were skating the system, all of a sudden I'm not paying $2 1/4 and they're 100 over. Then they're like, "Well, we should have stuck with you." So that helped us in that regard.
The question is, do you sell all your cattle on a value-based grid?
Yeah, everything kind of goes to the grid. From my perspective, I might at some point look in that direction. What I've liked to do is I've liked picking off the best Angus genetics and kind of trusting the Jerry Keneally's to create good bulls and kind of working those and kind of working them back through my herd. I will track those kind of calves and kind of see how it is, but I kind of believe in what the Angus Association is doing and what the Angus guys are doing, what they're creating. That's kind of been my model at this point.
So I think kind of what would be an interesting goal. I look at the dairy industry. I mean, most all of the cattle in our herd, all the females, on Dairy Herd Improvement Association, we've got records, we've got, EID tags. You know, my years on the South Dakota Animal Industry Board, we've struggled to legitimize animal identification. You know, it's you know, something that the beef industry, well, the dairy industry is further ahead. And I look at it as like, wow, we've got all this data. And so when you talk about the crossbred thing on the Holsteins, well, if you take it the next step, I mean, if every dairy producer owned all his cattle and he kept the record base on them and the matings, you'd have a lot of different data with beef on Holstein. And, you know, with what they do with genomics. I mean, I'm talking way above what I completely understand, but I can see in the future, you know, and that's what I've said with our dairy comp. Hey, when we retain ownership of these calves, let's hold the records ourselves. They don't just go away, and let's keep them, you know, but we're not at that step yet in our operations.
So I think the question is, can you see evaluating your dairy females on their abilities to produce an outstanding beef carcass? Is that correct?
So I was sitting with somebody from, I think it was from ST, or somebody asked the same question. I didn't get a good answer, but I mean,
I would say no.
yeah, I don't know if they're ever going to get there. I asked that question, but it's like I said, I don't know. There's things that you could have said to me 10 years ago, and I would have said, they'll never do that. I don't know. And, you know, I think something that, you know, we touched on it, that I think is from the dairyman's perspective, these calves have been kind of just, you know, you have them born one day and you get as much money as you can. I think what's interesting, like us, in the last year, you know, when we've been thinking about retaining ownership, really a focus on growing that beef animal, the livability, the things that we do with that calf, the extra doses of colostrum to ensure, you know, maybe if you didn't, you know, the serum protein thing, to make sure that calf's healthy. Because I would be remiss, one of the biggest problems, I think, probably in this whole industry that gives dairy on beef a black eye is the health of probably some of these animals that make it, you know, somebody goes to the feed, you know, goes to the sale barn and buys some, and they have a health problem because they weren't raised right in the beginning.
I think if you're talking about like dairy cows, are you talking about dairy cows with a beef genetic? Is that what he's trying to? Or
I think it was, you know, dairy cows that produce better beef carcasses.
The thing is, like a dairyman, like they make, that's why like if milk was the bet, if they made the most milk out of, they paid the most for jerseys, every dairy cow would be a jersey, right? Or they would switch things up if that's what it was. So their thing is making milk. So it's hard for the dairyman to have a beef mindset into the thing. If a cow had a good beef carcass, he would probably beef it because it probably wouldn't produce as much milk possibly.
Right.
So.
Very good. I appreciate all the many questions. Let's give our two speakers, Randall and Lynn, a big round of applause.